Hello, you're watching TVP World News. I'm Jonasz Rewiński. Norwegian F-35 fighter jets will begin a NATO air policing mission in Poland on Monday to help guard NATO airspace. The deployment comes amid an alarming increase in incursions by Russian manned and unmanned aircraft in recent weeks. The F-35s from Norway's 332nd Squadron will be stationed near the western Polish city of Poznań, says Polish Defense Minister Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz, who added that they will be joined by additional F-35s at the end of the month. Commenting on the deployment, a high-ranking Norwegian Defense Ministry official said that his country's mission in Poland will primarily be to defend NATO territory against airborne threats and intercept objects violating Polish airspace. This will be Norway's second mission of this type in Poland this year. The previous one began in January and lasted until the end of summer. US President Donald Trump has responded to Russian leader Vladimir Putin's proposal to extend the New START treaty, intended to reduce the number of nuclear warheads stockpiled by the US and Russia during the Cold War. Speaking to reporters at the White House lawn, Trump said the offer to extend the treaty to 2027 and renegotiate the terms for future agreements was, and I quote, a good idea.
After 2 weeks, US President Trump has finally responded to Putin's proposal to extend the New START treaty, the last surviving arms treaty between the world's two largest nuclear powers.
President Putin offers to keep limits on nuclear arms for 1 more year to then hopefully negotiate a new treaty.
Sounds like a good idea to me.
Set to expire in 2026, the treaty was thought to be abandoned in 2023. But on September 23rd, Putin offered to extend it until 2027. The treaty would then be renegotiated. While some experts describe Putin's proposal as a concrete step towards limiting the existing nuclear stockpile, many also point out that the move is likely mainly intended to strengthen Moscow's negotiating position with Washington.
Tankers from Russia's Shadow Fleet, which are used to evade Western sanctions, are also said to be responsible for a series of significant oil slicks in European waters. A joint investigation by the not-for-profit journalism group Source Material and Politico found that at least 5 vessels have continued to pass through European waters after spilling oil. Politico reports that 2 of the tankers were individually sanctioned by the UK before they left the slicks. The news site says the blatant disregard for maritime rules highlights the challenges Western governments face in controlling Russian oil exports and minimizing the risk of an environmental disaster in their waters. Now, Europe may be starting to speak with Warsaw's voice on the issue of migration, as EU officials vow to crack down on asylum seekers and illegal crossings. Poland has announced it will continue using border checkpoints over security concerns. Our defense correspondent Zuzanna Jurek has more.
At the European Interior Ministers' Summit on Migration in Munich, one sentiment reverberated especially loud.
We welcome any tightening of migration policy. We are pleased that the EU is beginning to speak with a Polish voice and is starting to talk about tightening this migration policy. The Polish approach can be seen month after month as it is adopted by successive governments in successive countries. And today we got the impression that the European Parliament should act even faster and more intensively because there is no time. We must act.
This comes just 2 days after the Polish Prime Minister Tusk flagged on the sidelines of the informal leaders' summit in the Danish capital of Copenhagen that Poland will extend the checkpoints on its borders.
We decided to close the border with Germany due to these cases of redirection of illegal migrants. They were not numerous, but they were very irritating and caused a lot of emotion on our side. These instances appear to have come to an end. As you know, the method we adopted was intended to end this tug of war at the border over illegal migrants. This matter has now been resolved, but we will continue to use these controls to prevent this mechanism from returning.
Warsaw initially moved to install the checkpoints on 2 of its borders, with Germany and Lithuania in July, citing security concerns over illegal migrant crossings. But as experts note, the reasoning behind this closure is more complicated than just security.
So there's a big difference between the Polish-German situation and the Polish-Lithuanian situation, because this exposure to the external EU traffic coming in is much greater on the northeastern border.
And it is this perceived weaponization of migration by the Minsk and Moscow regimes which pushed Europe to prioritize tightening migration policy. On Saturday, EU policymakers emphasized some of the successes to date.
The pressure is still high in all our neighboring countries when it comes to migration. And there have been many positive developments in recent weeks and months. You mentioned a few figures from Germany. We have seen a reduction in illegal border crossings across Europe of over 20% overall.
But some experts mirror, however, the sentiments presented by Poland. The bloc still has a long way to go in order to make its jurisdiction effective.
What is really important now is to coordinate those policy choices and to produce a policy on the EU level that would be addressing the concerns of the EU citizens and also enabled the mechanisms within the EU that would, on the one hand, address those concerns, but on the other also enable the free movement of people.
For TVP World, Zuzanna Jurek.
Protests erupted in Budapest on Sunday over an alleged child abuse scandal involving two government officials. Thousands took to the streets of the Hungarian capital in a show of solidarity for child protection and a stand against the imbalance and abuse in state-run facilities.
They are now very afraid for their own safety. If they fail here, they will go to prison, hopefully. They don't care about what they should care about. They don't protect the children, but attack those who oppose them. They are so attached to their power that they are no longer even looking for the guilty parties, but are punishing those who speak out against them. It points to a change in the system, because what is happening here in this country is that they are requesting EU funding and doing nothing that complies with EU standards. That is a disaster, and actually the EU must ban Hungary from all funds until the new government is formed.
The cabinet of the newly formed French government will meet for the first time on Monday. The gathering comes after the composition of the government under the new Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu was announced on Sunday. Of the 18 ministers appointed, only 2 are new to ministerial positions. 12 ministers remain in their roles, including Bruno Retailleau at the Interior Ministry, Gérald Darmanin at Justice, and Elisabeth Borne at Education. Lecornu is aiming to pass a controversial budget in the face of significant opposition. His promises to cut spending have triggered widespread protests. In September, he became France's 5th Prime Minister since 2022, after the previous government was brought down by a no-confidence vote. US President Donald Trump said he hoped representatives from Hamas and Israel could agree on the first phase of his peace proposal to end the war in Gaza. The two sides are due to meet in Egypt on Monday to discuss the release of hostages held by Hamas. Trump told reporters that his administration was working quickly to reach that objective.
Very quickly. We had some very good meetings. The countries of the world, a lot of the countries surrounding Israel, frankly, Muslim, Arab, and many others, have had great meetings with Hamas, and it looks like it's working. So we'll wait for a little while, see how it all turns out.
When will the administration begin firing?
I think it'll work very quickly. I think it's going to go very quickly. The meetings seem to be very good. We'll find out. We'll let you know soon.
From Amsterdam to Istanbul, the weekend saw a series of demonstrations in solidarity with Palestinians. The protests took place against the backdrop of the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza, which has seen over 67,000 Palestinians killed in 2 years.
250,000 people gathered in the Dutch capital on Sunday with the same goal, demanding that their government take a tougher stance against Israel and halt arms exports to it.
There's so much money, investments going to Israel, and we as our small country could already put more pressure on the Israeli government than we're doing right now. They're just talking. We're having a conversation.
On the same day, hundreds have also marched in support of Palestinians in Bulgaria's capital, Sofia.
Our society and the world needs to hear that we stand with the Palestinian people. A genocide is taking place, and it must stop. That is the core message of this protest and of today's march.
Demonstrators also gathered in Turkey's Istanbul and Ankara.
Until a certain period, the Palestinian issue appeared to be a problem linked to religious beliefs. But now it's become entirely a crime against humanity and has caused a huge reaction from the peoples of the world. I wanted to stand by our Gazan brothers and sisters. That's why I'm here.
A day earlier, on Saturday, hundreds of thousands of people marched in Spain, Italy, France, Portugal, and the United Kingdom to oppose Israel's military campaign and the Gaza Strip.
As the war in Ukraine continues, Beijing and Pyongyang are doubling down on their support for Russia's full-scale invasion, including intelligence sharing and arms production. At the same time, Russian leader Vladimir Putin insists relations between Moscow and Washington could fall apart if Tomahawk missiles are delivered to Kiev.
3.5 years into Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, a military alliance is solidifying in the east. According to new intelligence and public speeches, and in spite of protests from European leaders, China and North Korea are doubling down on their military support for Russia. On Saturday, an official from Ukraine's Foreign Intelligence Service said China is providing intelligence to Russia which allows Moscow to better guide its missiles striking inside Ukraine.
There is evidence of high level of cooperation between Russia and China in conducting satellite reconnaissance of the territory of Ukraine in order to identify and further explore strategic objects for targeting.
Oleg Alexandrov also said China is passing on satellite intelligence on Ukrainian targets, including those benefiting from foreign investment. A recent Russian missile strike on a U.S.-owned appliance factory in western Ukraine injured 15 people. This new development follows President Volodymyr Zelensky saying last April that China was supplying weapons and gunpowder to Russia and likely producing weapons on Russian territory. Next door, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un announced Sunday at a new weapons exhibition that Pyongyang is dedicating strategic military assets to counter what it calls the increasing presence of U.S. military forces in South Korea.
In direct proportion to the buildup of US forces in Korea, our strategic interest in the region has also increased, and we have accordingly allocated special assets to key targets of interest. I believe our enemies should be concerned about the direction their security environment is evolving.
Among the weapons displayed at the exhibition was the Hwasong-11 short-range ballistic missile. This particular missile has drawn international attention, with Ukrainian and Western officials alleging its delivery to Russia and subsequent use by Moscow in attacks against Ukraine. Thus far, Kim's public support for the Russian army consists of military planning, ammunition, and over 10,000 North Korean soldiers. Though North Korea is also publicly developing a well-funded drone program, there is as yet no evidence North Korean drones are being used in Ukraine or elsewhere in Europe. In a clear departure from the visibly friendly relations between U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska this August, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance says Washington is now considering a Ukrainian request to obtain long-range tomahawks that could strike deep into Russia, including Moscow. In response, video was released on Sunday of Putin saying if the United States supplied Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine for long-range strikes deep into Russia, it could sour Moscow's relationship with Washington.
There were issues raised, such as discussions about the supply of new weapon systems to Ukraine, including long-range and high-precision systems like Tomahawks. I have already said that this will lead to the destruction of our relations, or at least the positive trends that have emerged in these relations.
With Russian forces advancing in Ukraine, allegedly Russian drones flying in NATO airspace, Beijing and Pyongyang ramping up military production, and now Washington talking about direct participation in striking deep into the world's biggest nuclear power, peace seems further off than any other time this year. This military alliance might not just be in the East, as late on Sunday, Reuters reports it gained exclusive access to a sensitive U.S. diplomatic cable. In it, the U.S. says it will soon announce Cuba is actively supporting Russia's invasion of Ukraine. For TVP World, Randy Potts.
And that's all for now. Thank you for watching, and please stay with us here on TVP World.